You're showing as twice in the Zoom.
Am I? Okay, let's try this. How about now?
Yeah, you show as twice. I don't know if that'll create a problem or not.
Okay. We are at 6. Calling the Planning Commission meeting of January 11th, 2023 to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the statement of values. Secretary Bhatnagar.
Yes, Chair. Statement of values. As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interest of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Please have a seat. Wishing everyone a very happy new year. We'll do the roll call. Elizabeth.
Commissioner Bhatnagar,
Present.
Commissioner Biagini,
Present.
Chair Kuru,
Here.
Commissioner Hero is absent, Commissioner Wang,
Here.
Commissioner Buza,
Present.
Commissioner Salame.
Yes, here.
Wonderful, thank you.
We do have Commissioner Harrow out under the weather. Is there a motion to excuse Commissioner Harrow?
I'd like to make that motion. So moved.
Seconded.
All in. Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye. Aye, aye, sir.
Commissioner Bhatnagar,
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini,
Yes.
Chair Kuru,
Yes.
Commissioner Wang,
Yes.
Commissioner Buza,
Yes.
Commissioner Salame.
Yes.
Thank you, the motion passes.
Thank you. Wishing him a speedy recovery. Declaration of Commission procedures. Secretary Bhatnagar.
Yes, Chair. Public hearings are conducted by the Chair in accordance with the following procedures. The Chair of the Commission directs all activity during the meetings. All comments shall be addressed to the Commission. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent hearing. Applicants will be allotted up to 10 minutes to present and justify proposals. Following staff presentation of the item, other speakers will be given up to 2 minutes. The applicant is allotted up to 5 minutes for rebuttal of comments. No additional comments will be accepted upon the close of the public hearing, although the Commission reserves the right to direct questions to any speaker on any matter. Special procedures, time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the Chair. And lastly, appeal of Commission actions must be filed in writing within 7 calendar days. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Bhatnagar. Following the declaration, copies of the current agenda and staff reports for each of the items on the agenda are available from the Planning Division office on Friday afternoon preceding the meeting and available online. We move to the next order on the agenda, continuances, exceptions. This part of the meeting allows for applicants, members of the public, or other interested parties to request an item to be 1, continued without hearing, 2, withdrawn, or 3, taken out of order. Are there any requests from applicants, public, or commission for a continuance or exception for any of the item on tonight's agenda? I see one. Staff?
And Madam Chair, just a procedural matter, I would request that you declare the public hearing open for the housing element item and then entertain a motion to continue it.
I see.
And if there is any person tonight who cannot be present at the January 23rd Planning Commission meeting who would like to speak on the housing element tonight, they should be afforded the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. So following our attorney's guidance, the request for continuance for amendment to the City of Santa Clara General Plan by adopting an updated housing element for the 2023 to 2031 housing element cycle to be continued to the Planning Commission special meeting on January 23rd, 2023. I now open the continuance request to public hearing. We have members of the public and/or would like to state for the record.
If there are any members of the public that would like to speak on the housing element who cannot be present on January 23rd, now would be the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
If there are none, then it would be appropriate to entertain a motion to continue.
Okay. Are there any members of the public or online?
No, we do not have any requests to speak.
Seeing
Okay, I
none,
move to continue.
seeing none, we close public hearing.
No,
We don't.
we leave the public hearing open.
I see. Okay.
And did I just see Daniel raise his hand?
Yes.
We have another item, yes.
Hi, Chair.
Go ahead,
Daniel
Daniel.
Subcheck, Planner, City, Santa Clara. The applicant for item 1D would like to postpone to the February 8th, if that's okay.
Okay. We will take that as well as part of the vote later.
Thank you so much.
Are there any members of the public who want to speak to the second item moved to February 8th?
No, we do not have any speakers.
Okay, so we have 2 items under requisition for continuance. One, the first housing element to January 23rd, and the second to February 8th, 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second then, even though I had moved already.
Put him down as he moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Salem. We'll take it as second for you. We do have a motion by Commissioner Biagini.
Yes.
Commissioner Bhatnagar, yes, thank you. Commissioner Biagini,
Yes.
Chair Charakuru,
Yes.
Commissioner Wang,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Buza,
Yes.
Commissioner Salem,
Yes.
great, thank you, the motion passes.
So that moves us along to consent calendar items. We do have 4 items today. Secretary Bhatnagar.
Yes, and this pertains to the consent calendar. The procedure for the consent calendar is as follows. Consent calendar items may be enacted, approved, or adopted by one motion unless requested to be removed by anyone for discussion or explanation. If any member of the Planning Commission, staff, the applicant, or a member of the public wishes to comment on a consent calendar item or would like the item to be heard on the regular agenda, make this request now. Items listed on the consent calendar with associated file numbers constitute public hearing items. Do I go through the items?
Yes.
So,
We'll read the 4 items.
sure. So on today's consent calendar, and we have continued the item 1A. 1D.
Yes.
So the other items on the consent calendar are item 1A, Planning Commission meeting minutes of December 7, 2022. Item 1B, action on a variance request from the sign ordinance to allow for the placement of 4 temporary leasing signs for a duration of 2 years at 588 El Camino Real, also called the Benton, under CEQA Class 11A categorical exemption. And item 1C, action on a conditional use permit to allow for the increase of outdoor vehicle storage to 100% for a rental car company, Avis Budget Group, between 3270 and 3360 De La Cruz Boulevard, APN 101-11-047, under CEQA Class 5 categorical exemption. So those are the items that are on the consent calendar. Item 1D has been pulled for a later hearing or later commissioner meeting.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Bhatnagar. I would like to recuse myself from 1A, and thank you again for running the meeting. I apologize for my absence. So we have under consideration for consent calendar today, action 1B and 1C. Do we have a motion? Do we have questions? Anybody who would like to take this under discussion?
I'd like,
I would like,
go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to move and approve 1B and 1C action of variance request for the sign ordinance to allow for the placement of 4 temporary leasing signs for a duration of 2 years at 588 El Camino Real, the Benton CEQA Class 11A categorical exemption, and also for 1C use permit to allow to increase the outdoor vehicle storage to 100% for a rental company, Avis and Budget Group, between 3270 and 3360 De La Cruz Boulevard, Santa Clara, APN 101-11-047, and Class 5 CEQA categorical exemption.
I see Commissioner Biagini with a hand raised. Is there a comment to the motion?
I think Mario 1B, we've already agreed to move to February 8th. So I would like to make a friendly
Chair, that was
amendment.
1D.
One
mean
D.
1B?
Well,
I'm
that was
sorry.
1D, Nancy.
D as in dog.
The other one is, it's on the regular item. That's what it was.
Okay, the ones that haven't been moved. I'd
So
like to
that's
make a
1A,
motion
1D,
to
and
approve.
1C.
Yeah.
Okay. To confirm, today we are hearing items 1A, 1B, 1C under consent calendar. I have recused myself from the meeting minutes of December 7th. Commissioner Boozer has made the motion to approve 1B and 1C under consent calendar.
What about 1A?
And
1A
1A under consent.
And 1A.
calendar. Thank
The
you.
consent calendar.
Thank you.
And who's made the second?
Second.
Okay.
Don't tempt me.
Commissioner Bhatnagar?
Yes.
Commissioner Biagini?
Yes.
Commissioner Chair
Yes.
Kuru?
Yes.
Commissioner Wang?
Yes.
Commissioner Booza?
Yes.
Commissioner Salame?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Okay, we are on a roll here. Okay. We move to the next order of agenda, public presentations. This is I would say, topic under which we address, members of the public are invited to address any items not on today's agenda. Are there any members of the public that would like to briefly address the commission on any item not on today's agenda, online or?
No, I don't see any requests.
Okay, seeing none, we close public presentations and move to public hearing items. We had one item today on public hearing, which is the state housing legislation update that is now being continued to January 23rd. Is that the item? Okay.
No, but that sounds fabulous.
What is the housing element update? Oh, the updated housing element. Okay, so here we are with the study session, and I'm grateful that we have something for today. Sorry, Zach. Happy New Year. State housing legislation update study session.
Thank you, Chair Crew, members of the commission. My name is Alexander Abbey. I'm an assistant city attorney. So tonight we are continuing our annual tradition of going through the legislation that the state enacted within the last calendar year related to housing, since the city does so much with housing and the Planning Commission frequently is involved with it. Go ahead. We're going to have a tag team here of trying to get the presentation to work on two computers. We're going to talk about 7 different topics. We're going to start off with an easy bill about reconfiguring bedrooms. Then we're going to move on to the meat and potatoes, residential uses on commercial land. We're also going to talk about some changes to accessory dwelling unit laws, changes to density bonus laws, new restrictions on what the city can enact, what the city can require as far as parking for residential development, some minor changes to the housing element laws, and then a couple new laws dealing with equity and diversity. So I wanted to start off with something easy because I need to ease into it, and so here's just a simple appetizer. This one is AB 916. You know, a major cause of our housing crisis, I mean, there are many, but one of them is the mismatch between the supply of housing and the demand. One of the ways to facilitate more housing then is to maximize the utilization of existing space within residential units. This approach has gained heightened importance since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic due to both health concerns and the need for social distancing, as well as the increased time spent at home. So this bill simply says we're going to help maximize space within existing residential units. It will facilitate improved utilization of existing space by prohibiting public hearings when the space within an existing unit is reconfigured to add up to 2 bedrooms when no additional space is being added to the unit. So again, this applies only to reconfigurations of dwelling units that don't actually expand the dwelling. It just allows you to say, move the walls within a unit. So a 2-bedroom unit could be divided so now it'll have 3 bedrooms. This wouldn't affect any other requirements like, bedroom-based impact fees or parking requirements, and you'd still have to comply with building standards. All this says is that if you're going to reconfigure and add not more than 2 bedrooms, no public hearing. In Santa Clara, we do require a public hearing as part of the architectural review process if a project will result in a single-family residence with 5 or more bedrooms, or 2 or more bedrooms with direct exterior access. So now, to the extent we get development proposals that would have triggered a public hearing requirement, but are limited to just a reconfiguration, not an expansion, we won't be requiring a public hearing anymore. That's all for the first bill. I should have mentioned at the outset, I know there are several of you that really, really like to ask questions. Despite my tone of voice, I want to encourage you to do that at any time. You can hold them to the end, but if you want to jump in during the session, some of you consider it an Olympic sport, feel free. Oh, and we're off to the races. Commissioner PG.
Not that I like asking questions, and I'm not trying to stump the attorney. Okay, preliminary.
Really?
No, that's Lance's job. So my curiosity is, you've got 1 big bedroom, and you put a wall in between because you want to make 2 teeny bedrooms. One of them then ends up without having a window. Does that something that would not be permitted?
That would not be permitted because the fire code requires that every bedroom have a window. And you cannot skirt the fire code with this.
Yeah, gotcha. So
yeah.
If something...
You could knock a new window through the wall. I mean, if you could.
I mean, if you're going to do something like that, you'd have to
Yeah.
come to the planning department anyway, and that's where it would be caught. Am I correct? or no?
Oh, well, of course, they're not, I mean, you still need a building permit, and they're not going to approve a building permit that violates the building code or the fire code. So absolutely. This is just the public hearing aspect of it. It's supposed to just streamline this one limited type of thing a little bit.
Good answer. Thank you.
Seeing if there are other questions on AB 916. I know you have a full deck here. Any other raised hands? I might be missing some.
Yes.
Commissioners Salim? Yeah.
Okay, hi. So the only question I really had, I hopefully be a softball. When you've expanded the bedroom, or you've divided a bedroom, let's say, and you consume a shared hallway, is that allowed? Are you able to take up a interior space in whatever way you wish to create that second bedroom, or are there other restrictions other than the egress windows and things like that? Because I didn't get any clear answers on that.
Right. Well, as our zoning ordinance stands today, there aren't a lot of restrictions on how you can configure your dwelling unit. Our new zoning ordinance will have a provision related to having a sort of shared area like a living room or recreational space. We want to preserve having a certain square footage for to basically prevent every inch just being taken up with bedrooms and not have any open shared area. So our new zoning ordinance does propose a minimum amount of space set aside for something like a living room. That is not in our current zoning ordinance, but you will be seeing that in the new zoning ordinance that's coming forward shortly. So they would have to comply with that. Nothing in this bill prohibits us from enacting something like that.
Okay, so I think the confusion I had is whether consuming a pathway to declare a space to be an additional bedroom is kosher, because I can imagine in my head the plans of a particular layout that had 2 bedrooms, and suddenly you declare that there's 4 bedrooms because you walk through one of the bedrooms to get to the other one. Do you understand my question? Is
right?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Right. So I think your question is, can you make it so that, can someone design their unit so that the bedroom at the end will have to traverse through the middle bedroom to get to the exit? Or does there always have to be an independent hallway? To my knowledge, there does not always have to be an independent hallway. You can make it as awkward as you want for the people in the further bedroom.
Okay, well, that means division is not based on any kind of pathway consideration. Got it. Thank you.
I see Commissioner Booza's hand up.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'd like to know what the purpose of this is in reality, because if it's the same member of a family, my recollection is when you were like a child, you were a kid, you used to share a bedroom, you have bunk beds and so on. Now, it looks like the intent of this is to go ahead and start renting out rooms left and right, and just it's going to destroy the makeup of the neighborhoods. You're going to have increasing parking and so on. So this doesn't make sense. Sounds like, what is the real purpose behind all of this? And one of the other things too that I want to bring into, I think I was just thinking with a few seconds ago was that, you're going to have electrical. You're going to be building up the walls. So you're going to have like the walls, put electrical in between the walls. You're going to have the get permits to do that. So it isn't like you're just going to walk in and just put up some 2x4s and stick some, cardboard in there, and there you go. But this doesn't sound too kosher and too appealing to me. There's something hidden behind all of this agenda here. Sounds like if somebody wants to do this so they can just go ahead and start renting out rooms more than anything else, not for members of the own family, because members of the own family, you would share a room. That's all.
Well, right, to clarify, I mean, you are correct, Commissioner Booza. You would still need an electrical permit, a building permit. You can't just start sticking up 2x4s. You would absolutely need to do it according to code. As far as the policy choice, why the legislature chose to enact this, I mean, they are confronting the significant housing crisis from many different angles. Whether
I-
or not this is the right policy choice, I will leave to you and the voters. But this is what we are now required to do to allow for divisions like this. The only change for our purposes is we can no longer require a public hearing for this kind of reconfiguration.
Let me bring that, and that is completely wrong. I'm 100% against that, because that just completely, like I said, destroys the neighborhood. If you have families that have just bought their house and they love their neighborhood, they love Santa Clara, and you all of a sudden going to have a 2-bedroom house become a 4 or 5-bedroom house and have the rooms rented out. This is just not what intention for the city is. Perhaps this is something maybe that their city attorney can start looking into it and talk to our, people in our assembly or legislature, if we can change some of the, this law. It's not right. And I just feel, it doesn't feel like it's going to be good for our city. That's what the most important thing for our citizens and our city.
Yeah.
To clarify, this only applies when there's a reconfiguration that would add up to 2 bedrooms. So you would not go from 2 to 5 ever. You could only go from 2 to 4. But I'd just like to suggest to the commission, this is the lightest of the bills we're going to see tonight. It's the easiest. Why don't we get to the harder stuff before we start calling the legislature?
Okay, so I heard you, Xander. So let's keep moving. We will.
Please.
Well,
I promise I'll only take 1 minute.
okay, so do you have a question? Is that what you want?
Kind of a comment more.
Okay, go ahead.
Along the concerns that Commissioner Bouza has, I understand the angst and the anger and the disappointment with what's happening. We got to all keep in mind, these aren't things that are going to happen. These are things that did happen. Now we're responding to it, right? So our objective is to find ways to make sure that the quality of life of our residents aren't affected, but we can't take a moral high ground and say, we can't do this. It's done. It's another case of those you need to respond to the situation as it is, not fight the bull that's charging at you. So I sympathize greatly with Xander, and I will try to not interrupt him further. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
We're all in the same mood, Xander. Just FYI. Okay, let's keep moving. Xander.
All right. This is the meat and potatoes. You are here because we have zoning rules, and zoning, of course, is an exercise of the police power, the power of the government to protect health, safety, welfare. All states delegate zoning authority to local governments, and all local governments divide their cities into districts, zones of appropriate number, shape, and area with specific prescribed uses for each zone. Well, to the extent the city has chosen areas for exclusively commercial uses, the state has determined that that no longer matters. Beginning July 1st of this year, there's going to be a right to build residential uses on commercial land. These are the only 2 bills, by the way, I'm mentioning tonight that have a later effective date than January 1st. Everything else we're talking about tonight went into effect 10 days ago. These 2 bills, they gave us a little bit more of a buffer. They go into effect July 1st. So let's start with Senate Bill 6. It's called the Middle Class Housing Act. And what it says is that housing is an allowable use in commercial zones. Commercial zones being where office, retail, or parking are the primary permitted uses. So a fairly significant change in land use law. We can no longer have zoning districts that are strictly for commercial or office uses. In all of our commercial or office zones, you can now also build housing. Now, the law doesn't mandate that the project be 100% housing. You can still have a mixed-use development, provided that if you're going to put housing, at least 50% of the square footage will be devoted to residential use. There's also a long list of conditions that a project has to satisfy before it can take advantage of Senate Bill 6. One of them is the density. Projects have to be developed at least the density necessary to support low-income housing. And for a metropolitan city like Santa Clara, that's defined as 30 dwelling units per acre. If you want to build housing in a commercial zone, it has to be at least 30 dwelling units per acre. And the housing will be subject to local zoning standards and approvals for the zone that can accommodate that density, 30 dwelling units per acre. Things like setbacks, lot coverage, and even parking. We have the R336D zone in our current zoning ordinance that allows up to 36 dwelling units per acre, so that would probably apply. In the new zoning ordinance, we have an R3 zone, which again goes up to 36 dwelling units per acre. So a developer will have to comply with those standards. In most cases, Senate Bill 6 projects will have to pay prevailing wages and use a skilled and trained workforce. That can significantly increase the cost of development, so will be a deterrent to some developers taking advantage of this. There are also a number of site restrictions. The project can't adjoin industrial uses or be on a site where more than a third of the site is dedicated to industrial uses. It can't be adjacent to that either. The site also can't be more than 20 acres. There are prohibitions on building on wetlands, hazardous waste sites, or in flood hazard zones. Now, notably, Senate Bill 6 does not require that any of the units in the proposed housing project be affordable, except to satisfy a local inclusionary housing requirement. So a residential structure built on a commercial site will still have to meet the city's 15% inclusionary requirement. But other than that, there's no special affordability requirement. Now, this is not a ministerial approval. This is something that, so projects will still go through the architectural review process. That being said, for housing, architectural review now has to be objective, so it's almost ministerial anyway. But this will still trigger CEQA review potentially, so they'll at least have to go through the CEQA process even if they don't need a rezone anymore. But again, no affordability requirement other than whatever our inclusionary ordinance requires. If they do provide affordable unit, the other bill applies, and that's AB 2011. AB 2011 is called the Affordable Housing and High Road Jobs Act. Under AB 2011, the city is now required to ministerially approve any housing project, meaning no discretionary review and no CEQA review. And this applies to housing projects that are 100% affordable proposed for commercial zones. Just like the last bill, that means zones that allow office, retail, or parking as a principal permitted use. There's again a minimum density requirement, and for 100% affordable projects like this, it's a flat 30 units per dwelling, 30 dwelling units per acre. And just like with the other bill, they have to follow the development standards in our zoning ordinance for the zone that allows 30 units per dwelling acre. Oh, why can't I say that tonight? 30 dwelling units per acre, thank you. But it's a 100% affordable housing project, and the density bonus law already provides that if a project's 100% affordable, you don't have to provide any parking. So these projects will not have to provide any parking. Once again, AB 2011 projects will have to pay prevailing wages, which will increase developer costs. Also, projects of 50 units or more will have to use registered apprentices and provide health care expenditures for employees and dependents who construct, for the employees who build the project and also their dependents. And once again, there are site restrictions. You can't build next to an industrial site or a site where more than a third of the site area is dedicated to industrial uses. There are a few other less common exceptions, like it can't be built on prime farmland or wetlands or floodways, and it can't be within 500 feet of a freeway. There's some short timelines for the city to review these projects. We only have 60 to 90 days to determine whether or not it complies with our objective development standards. And then for design review purposes, which again can only be objective, we only have 90 to 180 days. That's the first part of AB 2011. There's another part. There's also ministerial approval of, could you advance? Of mixed income projects in commercial corridors. And what that means is a commercial corridor, well, let me start with mixed income. What does that mean? That means you're either going to provide 8% very low income units and 5% extremely low income units for a total of 13%, or you'll provide 15% low income. Now, that's not the biggest threshold because our affordable housing ordinance already requires 15%. So basically, every project will be subject to this if it's on a commercial corridor. So what is a commercial corridor? That's a highway that is 70 to 150 feet wide, not including a freeway. Doesn't even talk about like what kind of uses are allowed in that area. It's just how wide is the road. So obviously El Camino Real, Stevens Creek Boulevard are going to be subject to this. Some smaller roads too. We're going to have to get out our tape measure and figure out every road that is going to be subject to this. All of those, quote, commercial corridors are going to be subject to AB 2011. Anyone can build a mixed income project in these commercial corridors, and it's ministerial approval. Now, the minimum density is a little higher for this type of project. It's not necessarily 30 units per acre. It is 30 units per acre if the site is less than an acre. But if it's more than an acre and it's on a smaller commercial corridor, less than 100 feet wide, it's 40 units per acre. If it's more than an acre, but it's on a commercial corridor of 100 feet in width or greater, it's 60 units per acre. And ignoring the width completely or the size of the property, if it's within a half mile of a major transit stop, the minimum density is 80 units per acre. So that's not a range, that 30 to 80. That's just simply the minimum is one of those numbers in there, 30, 40, 60, or 80, depending on the type of site and exactly where it's located. Just like with the other bill, they have to follow the development standards in our zoning ordinance for the zone that follows the applicable density. But here too, even though it's not 100% affordable, no parking can be required. The only exception here is that this article says that this particular provision in the bill says that we can still require bicycle parking, electric vehicle parking, and parking for the disabled. That would requirements that would otherwise apply if AB 2011 weren't in play. I didn't have room on the slide, but there are similar requirements to the other two slides. All AB 2011 projects have to pay prevailing wages, they have to use registered apprentices, they have to provide health care expenditures to the construction workers, and again, there are site restrictions. It can't be an industrial site. And again, there's short timelines for the city to review these projects. So again, this takes place on July 1st. For any roadway that is 70 feet or more in width, this will allow for ministerial approval of housing development projects, irrespective of the zoning. And I'll pause here.
Don't.
And wait for the screams.
All right. We do have quite a few hands from commissioners. Commissioner Biagini.
Three questions. And I don't know if these are going to be as easily answered. Well, the first one might be. So for those that are listening tonight or maybe listening in the future, this whole issue of define 100% affordable. Can you talk about that definition in Santa Clara of what is or how affordable is determined?
Certainly. So the State Department of Housing and Community Development and the local council of governments, I think, publishes annually the area median income, and then for each county in the state, and then the affordability is determined by what percentage of area median income a household would be paying in rent or what housing price they could afford to purchase. So low income is defined as 80%, not more than 80% of area median income. Very low income housing is defined as not more than 50% of area median income. And Extremely low income is defined as not more than 30% of area median income. Then there's above moderate income, which is 120% of area median income. For a project to be affordable, when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about it has to be at least at the low income level, which means not more than 80% of area median income. When we're talking about a, quote, 100% affordable development, the mix that the state allows is 80% low income and not more than 20% moderate income. So a developer that wanted to charge the highest prices they could while still being, quote unquote, 100% affordable could make 80% of the units low income and 20% of the units moderate. There's also a wrinkle in there where you can have caretaker units, I think 1 or 2, that would be market rate. But, you know, that's all based on these thresholds set by the county, the state. I can't remember exactly who assigns them all, but it's all based on area median income. And of course, the reality is you can make 80% of area median income and still not be able to afford housing.
Yeah, you're actually touching on what my third comment will be. Second comment, it talks about highway 70 to 150 feet wide. For example, I don't necessarily think of Lafayette as a highway.
It's just a road. Highway is a very broad definition.
I was going to say, isn't that 70 feet wide?
Yes.
So this could apply to that corridor?
Yes.
Okay.
It does.
Yeah, I
there's no
figured as
question.
much.
I'm sure it does.
I wanted to make sure
unless
that's
it's unless it's over 150 feet. 150 feet is the max, but
I don't think it's
no.
over, but I would bet money. Because I think it's important that people realize this, and that kind of leads into the third comment / question.
I'm sorry. I thought you said Lawrence. You said Lafayette. I'm not sure that's 70. Is that how many lanes is Lafayette? Is that if it's 12 feet?
Depends on what side of Lafayette are you speaking about.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So portions of Lafayette probably
Yes.
are.
Probably are.
And so it will depend on whether or not a particular site is adjoining the portion of the road that exceeds 70 feet.
Oh, boy. All right. So then kind of leading into my third one, what I think would be kind of important, and how will the city deal with this, is community outreach about this type of stuff, because I fully anticipate that come July 2nd, that there are going to be folks out of their minds about that's not affordable, or what do you mean no parking? It's going to kill my neighborhood adjacent to this development. And that I think it's important. I know it's funny now, Mario, but just wait, right? But I mean, I think it's important that people realize this is not something that the city of Santa Clara said we're going to do and that's it. That this is something coming down from county, state, folks above us. So that's why I'm asking the question, a way that there could be some community outreach. And I recognize that sometimes you can do Nextdoor, Facebook, the city little newspaper that they put out, Santa Clara. You can do all of that, and somebody's going to say, how come nobody told me? But my interest is, how much will we actually do, or are we prepared to do, so that folks understand what's coming is not something that we necessarily wanted, but it's coming from above. So I guess that's more of a comment, unless you have some ideas of, or Leslie has some ideas on what's to come on outreach.
I don't know offhand. The planners may have a better answer, but to the extent they want to have, say, more sessions like this in other venues, I'd be happy to participate to help explain.
Yeah, because it's coming.
Commissioner Salem?
Just a second. Turn things back on again. All right. So in tradition of Stump the Lawyer, does a road that has been had the width narrowed for bike corridors or other transit options constitute a highway still, if or are the individual portions of the road counted separately?
The definition is kind of vague.
Yeah.
It's a highway, which is then it refers to right of way. Right of way can include sidewalks. So my expectation is that if you have dedicated part of the right-of-way to bicycle lanes, you would not subtract the bicycle lanes from the width. It would still qualify as part of the width.
So even narrower residential roads that currently are maybe 2 lanes or even, 2 with a turn lane, because they have now had added bike lanes, are going to be eligible for this.
Well, I think you might be mistaken there, Commissioner, if there's only
good.
2 lanes. Each lane's about 12 feet. I mean, a bicycle lane's going to be less than that. I don't think you're going to hit 70 feet. Keep in mind, it's if your site is adjoining the roadway and where you're adjoining the roadway exceeds 70 feet. It's not, if a portion of the road is 70 feet, then the entire roadway for the entire stretch of the street it qualifies. You look at each individual portion of the roadway.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I could draw in my brain a few examples, but I don't want to belabor it in the meeting. I'm just concerned that in our efforts to improve transit within our own city, we're narrowing roads, but those narrowed roads are still going to be fully qualified for this type of building, which will increase their expected traffic instead of reduce it. Because as you said, no parking and high density, 30 to 80 units.
Yes.
So suddenly we have created, or not created, but responding to the idea of a nightmare scenario of traffic jams. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Boozer?
Yes, Commissioner Salim, what he was probably referring to was Prune Ridge, that's going to go into a road diet, and that's over 70 feet. I can see the dilemma that we're going to have there, and I agree with Nancy regarding all our citizens are going to be coming around screaming and yelling, but at the same time, they're going to wake up and see what's going on in our state assembly and also in the county. But one of my one of the things that I see too is going to be a problem. You have San Tomas Woods, the entrance to San Tomas Woods, that's more than 70 feet wide. So does that apply also? And like Commissioner Salim mentioned, the problems with parking, that's going to be something that we're really not, it's going to create a mess for our whole city. This is, whoever came up with all of this plan really wasn't thinking clearly. I have an idea that had to be somebody that has never been a homeowner and doesn't really have that much input in their city. When the other part too that I was concerned with, they keep calling it affordable housing. I think we should call it more like subsidized housing, because somebody that's poor probably couldn't even afford anything. So it's not really affordable. It should be more like a subsidized housing to help our some of our citizens that they're less capable of affording things. But I agree with Nancy, we're gonna have a lot of issues coming up with our citizens, and I hope we can all come out with this, without too many scars, but it's not going to be pretty. I got a feeling it's not going to be pretty. I have people that here, they're staying with us. I just heard what this is going on, and they're just screaming already. So I pray to God that we all get through this. I agree with Commissioner Salim and Nancy. It's going to be something to look forward to. Thank you.
Any other commissioners before I give my comments? Salim, do you still have your hand up? No, okay. I hear the commissions, and I'm sure there are communities across reacting to this. It's very apparent more and more that the state is intentional about removing any kind of perceived hurdles, is what I could say at this time, to housing projects. There are, of course, various interests to support housing initiatives, including from developers. To most suburban communities, this will come as a rude awakening, especially with no parking, with absolutely no clear definition of AMIs, median incomes, and will continue to be city council. I doubt if counties engaged at different levels, but since it's passed, the question for Xander is, what are other communities' responses looking like? Are there interests? I've heard, some communities reacting by just putting other objectives, design-based standards and objectives on their layers. How about historic preservation or districts that have historic designation? What are our opportunities to actually then influence projects that are not well received by the community or the city?
Yeah, that's a really an excellent question, Chair. I mean, last year the big bill was Senate Bill 9, which of course allowed you to add additional dwelling units to your single-family lot. And in response to that, there was quite the uproar and a lawsuit and a statewide initiative to overturn it. I haven't heard quite the same chatter about these bills, but I will definitely look into that and find out for you. There are, as I mentioned, there are sort of a laundry list of conditions that have to be met, like you can't build on a wetland, you actually can't build on a, site that would affect Native American resources. I didn't see anything in the bill about historic resources, but I would be shocked if they would just allow you to get all around state historic preservation laws with this. So, so let me find out for you the nuance of what happens if there's a historic property involved. Because it's a ministerial act, so there's no CEQA review. Normally we'd say, well, is it exempt from CEQA? And then we'd look at, well, even if it's exempt, there's a special circumstance, which is that it's historic. But here, you don't even get to CEQA because it's ministerial, so we don't get to ask that question. So, so let me find out for you what we do when there's a historic site, at least. And then I'll also look into what other communities are doing about this. I mean, other than screaming.
And to Commissioner Biagini's point, I would highly encourage a very concerted effort in distributing information about these housing laws / opportunities, I'm sure, for those who are interested, out into the community. And we have, again, a topic we'll bring up later on how we engage with our community on these evolving. Again, attending I'll give feedback, and I'm sure the other commissioners who attended the CEQA conference will attend. A large part of the missing equation is transportation around all of this. We could look like New York, but we don't have the subway system connecting us with no parking. I mean, what is the state thinking? Sorry, somebody's going to quote me on that, but I'm sure 100 people are saying the same thing. But we don't have the missing link with transportation, allowing us to completely rid ourselves of parking. And with Tesla's burgeoning and state laws supporting on other front for sustainability, whatever, EV vehicles, something doesn't add up. So we're all frustrated, as you can see, Will, and I now sense your tone in coming into the meeting. But it is, I think, a moment of reckoning for a lot of the cities around us, especially the cities who have absolutely, declined to acknowledge even RENA numbers. I would be really interested in how the developer community is reacting to all of this and what their opportunity. And I almost had a sinking feeling like, see ya. You feel like deflated. So thank you. What else?
We've got more bills to discuss. I will say that was probably the biggest thing that you'll have to see tonight. You can see why I didn't want to start with it. But it gets easier from here, I promise. If you have more questions about those bills, I'd be happy to talk about those more at the end or right now, either way.
Yeah, one more question just on the previous bill, just a matter of semantics and logistics,
Yes.
AB 916. So are we now reconciling with our architectural review committee requirement for 5+ bedrooms to come through ARC/appeals to Planning Commission? Is that now like a myth?
Well, we are in the legally awkward position of having a zoning ordinance that no longer complies with state law. When you have a state law and a local law that conflict, of course, you have to follow the state law. So we will simply not follow those provisions in our old zoning ordinance until such time as we complete the zoning ordinance update. The zoning ordinance update will most assuredly correct that so that that provision does not exist anymore. But yeah, we will be careful not to impose a public hearing requirement in violation of state law.
I hope we tighten Airbnb, since 5 bedrooms plus will almost not even have parking. All right, so looking for a robust zoning ordinance update and our design-based standards discussion in the future that help us shine a light or show that light at the end of the tunnel or a silver lining. But yeah, this can be pretty deflating for the community. Next, move to the next.
All right, the rest of the bills will go much faster. I have relatively few bills about accessory dwelling units tonight. I want to first,
Oh, I see Commissioner Salem. Hold, just one thought.
I'm sorry.
He's
Go ahead,
almost doing a
Commissioner.
dance and a hula dance
Yes.
there.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh, my goodness. I just didn't want to drive too far beyond the question of the number of bedrooms.
Okay.
I believe it's a reasonable statement to say that the vast majority of single-family homes that are existing today are 3 bedrooms. Now, hopefully I'm not saying something off the cuff. I believe that the majority of our residents are 3-bedroom homes. The law now says they can make it 5-bedroom homes, which is the part of what I believe you were saying is the collision with our architectural standards, because the idea of going to 5 bedrooms would normally trigger a review. But now they have the ministerial option of going to 5 bedrooms.
Yes.
And a review would be inappropriate. Are there situations that it still requires a review, even though the number of bedroom increases to without the change of the footprint of the home? So that's the question to Xander. Are there other aspects of that transition that still trigger a review?
Setbacks.
And that's for Xander.
They're adding no square footage. They're not adding any square footage.
We're just talking reconfiguration, Commissioner? They're just moving a wall and not increasing the footprint.
What about
So
height?
now the incentive is going to be for people to avoid the architectural review by not increasing the overall square footage of their home and simply dividing to much smaller bedrooms. They will achieve the 5-bedroom level and skirt the whole issue of being an architectural review situation. So,
Well, okay, so a couple things. First of all, remember, for residential development, we no longer have any ability to impose discretionary architectural standards. For a year or two now, we've been limited to objective standards, so that hasn't changed. Our architectural review ordinance, as we amended it a couple years ago, distinguishes between, adding a certain number of bedrooms and not. It has these 2 pathways. One is you go to a public hearing. The other, it's a staff level review. You don't go to public hearing. But for residential development, both of those are objective reviews only. So we've talked, amongst staff about, maybe just getting rid of the development review hearing, the public hearing for residential, because what's the point? All we can do is just check the boxes and say whether or not it's objective or not. So I question whether there's any value in having a public hearing when members of the public may come and say, I don't like this design, but all we can say is, I'm sorry, we have to approve it. It meets the objective standards. So the only change here, again, is we're no longer allowed to do public hearing. We'll simply make it staff level review. But whether it's at a public hearing or it's a staff, it's still going to be objective standards anytime residential uses are involved.
So a staff level hearing does not involve any notice to residents' neighbors, correct?
A staff level review would not ordinarily have notice. Yes, a public hearing conducted by the development director who's delegated to our planning manager does involve notice to the neighbors, yes.
Okay. Now then the follow-up is, if they're not increasing the square footage, can they change the roof line without any review? Does the roof line constitute a substantial reconfiguration of the home?
The bill as drafted is very sparse and doesn't specifically address that. That being said, I did read the Senate and Assembly reports, and they make it clear that the intention was to preserve the building envelope. This is only for when you are making changes interior and don't change the envelope, and that would include changes to the roof line. So yeah, if you're gonna move the roof, you're gonna go to public hearing.
Okay.
And then apply objective standards. So
One last curveball. Okay. So they decide they want to increase the square footage of the home. Can they use the concept of an attached ADU to add the extra 2 bedrooms from that direction, and therefore also completely negate architecture review and everything else, because ADUs are automatically approved?
Well, okay, so there's 2 kinds of attached ADUs. There is a JADU, which is 500 square feet or less, and cannot expand the envelope of the house except for an extra 150 feet to add an entryway. If you're building a JADU, the only reason to put in a JADU is if you're also going to do a detached ADU separately on the lot. So I assume we're not talking about that circumstance. So you're going to have one and only ADU, and it's going to be an attached ADU, and you want to use that to expand your building footprint. Yes, you can do that without a hearing. That would be a ministerial approval.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're discovering is basically the handcuffs are going on really early in the process, and they're going to do whatever they want, and that's the way it is. And the neighbors can't say anything about it. So when the neighbors come at us with pitchforks and torches, we're going to have to point them at the state and say, this is what the state has allowed, and therefore we're sorry. Thank you for your concern. I don't see any way out of it, because there's too many ways to accomplish these large increases in square footage without any input from anyone other than a signature. So, all right, that's it.
Yeah, I think all of that is accurate, Commissioner, and certainly my preference would be you point them towards the state and not your attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wouldn't be having the hearing for the pitchfork to come here. Just FYI, Planning Commission is getting almost redundant.
Yeah. No, I've listened to a number of concerned citizens in the council meetings over issues that are completely and totally outside of their control. And now I'm seeing a tremendous number of these things that are going to have angry residents coming to meetings complaining that neighbors are going completely crazy and adding tons and tons of space with no additional parking needed. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few years. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well-
Let's move on.
All right,
One final thing, though, before you move on, one final thing, I wanted to ask a quick question on this. So can you convert the attic, when they convert an attic and add bedrooms from there, would that still be included for the 2-bedroom? And then if you have a garage, convert that garage too, can you do that at the same time? I'm just wondering. Can you convert the garage and then add 2 more rooms like in your attic? Is that considered separate?
Well, you can certainly make a attic into a bedroom if you comply with building codes and it has, all the requisite
But you
building
said
code
they wouldn't,
standards.
they didn't have to do building codes
No,
anymore.
they do need building permits. All of projects require building permits. So
Building
it's
permits, but they can go ahead and add it. But how about in the garage? If they want to go ahead and convert the garage into few more bedrooms and still
Right.
change the bedrooms inside, because you're only allowing 2 bedrooms.
Right. Well, the issue is not whether or not you can only have 2 bedrooms. The issue is whether or not there's going to be a public hearing. If you are doing a reconfiguration that will result in no more than 2 bedrooms, then we cannot require a public hearing. But they could still put in 3 bedrooms. It just might trigger the public hearing part of our review process, which, again, is probably not that useful. As far as a garage conversion, well, for simply, if you want to add bedrooms to your house, can you convert your garage and not replace the parking? No. But there's a huge asterisk on that because you can convert a garage into an accessory dwelling unit. And if you make an ADU in your garage, you do not have an obligation to replace the parking. So if Commissioner, you want to put a bedroom in your attic, that's great. And then if you want to also use your garage, just make it an ADU. So have a kitchen and a bathroom and you're good to go. And the city cannot say no. And you don't need any parking.
And it's total 2 new bedrooms. Is there time bound, meaning you could avail it only once, like SB9? Or is there like a sale transaction? Now I have 4 bedroom. Yeah, it was permitted.
Right.
That's an excellent question. SB9 expressly contemplated that situation. This bill did not contemplate that. So that's an unanswered question. We'll see. I would try and say no in that circumstance.
Yeah. And Lance, for one of the regarding you said pitch and pork, if you recall when they wanted to Sobrado wanted to put boxcars in the corner of San Tomas and Monroe, we had an overflow inside the city council's chambers all the way down to the cafeteria and outside. So I think this may be one of those things. I got a feeling that it's going to turn out to be maybe our state assembly representatives could come down at the same time and talk to our citizens. That'll be really interesting. But I think that's where we're gonna. I don't see pitch and forks, but I'm gonna see a lot of angry citizens coming up.
Which will you elect? Go ahead. Next.
All right, let's talk about ADUs. This will take about 2 minutes. Because for once, there aren't a huge number of ADU laws, at least not that many that are that applicable to Santa Clara. As you know, you have a right to build an accessory dwelling unit on your single-family lot. You can build 1 detached unit. You could also do 1 attached unit, or you could do 1 junior accessory dwelling unit that's attached to your house that's no more than 500 square feet, and a separate detached unit. Here's a simple change to ADU law that changes the maximum height that you can build. Right now, the previous said that the city had to allow for at least 16 feet for ADUs, regardless of type. Now, they've increased that a little bit. Under this bill, SB 897, if you're on a detached ADU that's more than a half mile away from transit, it's still 16 feet. But if you're within a half mile of either a major transit stop or a high-quality transit corridor, now you get another 2 feet. The city now has to allow for at least an 18 feet height for a detached ADU. And you can also get that extra 2 feet if you're building a detached ADU on a lot with an existing or proposed multifamily residence, regardless of how close it is to transit. You can also go up to 18 feet. And finally, attached ADUs that are stuck to the main dwelling unit, they can now go up to 25 feet or the maximum height of the primary dwelling, whichever is less. You can also get an additional 2 feet of height in addition to all of these if it's necessary to match the roof pitch of the primary dwelling. So this just makes ADUs a little bigger.
And do the 2-bedroom apply to ADUs?
So you're asking about the earlier bill about no public hearing for reconfiguring 2 bedrooms. So if you want to reconfigure the 2 bedrooms in an ADU?
Because 18 feet could technically give you 2 stories.
Yes.
You just have a 4-bedroom ADU now.
Does it apply to ADUs or only single family detached? Or single family is their definition?
You win. You stumped the attorney. Congratulations, Chair.
Priya.
Points, 1 point for Priya tonight. She's the first one. All right. So does SB 897, all right, does the two, I just got to write this down. Apply to ADUs. I will get back to you on that. Sorry.
That's a
Lance.
good question.
Okay, and then one other ADU bill. This one is not as interesting because it's just about procedures. If the city denies an ADU application, the city now has to provide a full set of comments to the applicant with a list of items that are deficient and a description of how the application can be remedied. It also beefs up the 60-day timeline we have to review ADU applications. The city was already required to act on an ADU application within 60 days. Now the legislation clarifies that you can't use things like interdepartment referrals or issuing design comments to stretch out the 60-day timelines. I think some cities were getting creative with how they interpreted 60 days. The city already has to waive development standards like height, lot coverage, and rear and side yard setbacks if it would be impossible to build an ADU that's at least 800 square feet in size. This bill adds front setbacks to that list of waivable standards. So if the city has, say a 20-foot front setback requirement, and there's no way to situate an ADU on a lot other than within that front setbacks, the city must now waive that front setback requirement, provided that the ADU is at least 4 feet from the front property line. That's going to be beautiful. Also, now there's a prohibition on requiring fire sprinklers in the primary dwelling. And you can't require fire sprinklers in a primary dwelling as a condition to adding an ADU. I mean, certainly new construction, you build a new house, you got to put in sprinklers. But if you have an existing house, we can't say as a condition of building this ADU, you got to put in sprinklers.
Irrespective of the square footage, like 1,000 square feet plus 2 bedrooms, no fire sprinklers. Could be made bigger than the main dwelling.
Understood. You can't put them, we cannot require that they be put in the primary dwelling. In the ADU, I don't remember what the rule is.
It's new construction, so
I would think you'd need it, but I don't remember that for sure. Finally, construction of the ADU does not change the occupancy type for purposes of building code compliance. So I think some cities were trying to limit attached ADUs by saying, well, if you attach an ADU, then you have a multifamily dwelling, you got to beef up your, the width of your walls for fire safety requirements. No, it's still the same kind of occupancy for purposes of the building code and fire code. That's actually all I have on ADUs tonight. There are a bunch of other changes that are irrelevant, like what if you don't define density, and it's just not that relevant. So I'll just move on to density bonuses. The state density bonus law, as you know, provides that if a developer provides a certain percentage of units affordable to moderate and lower income households, the developer can go above the otherwise allowable density of the zoning. So I'm going to need your help in some rapid fire clicking. The first, here's just the basic density bonus law. If you provide a certain amount of housing, very low, low, or moderate, in these percentages, 5% very low, you get a 20% bonus, and then you get one incentive. An incentive is something like, we'll agree to reduce a setback or change a height limit, something like that. If it's low income, if you provide 10% of the units low, then you get a 20% bonus, one incentive. And if it's 10% moderate income units, you get a 5% bonus and one incentive. If you provide a greater percentage, then you get a bigger bonus. So 10% very low, you get a 32.5% bonus. And you can see the more affordable units you provide, the greater the bonus, the greater the number of incentives. And it goes on so that you have as many as 3 incentives and higher bonuses. Most bonuses max out at 50%. You can keep adding adding units until you get a 50% density bonus. And then for most types of housing, it maxes out. Now, there are a few other categories of housing that trigger density bonuses. The most relevant for our purposes are 100% affordable developments. I mentioned these earlier in another context, and that's where every unit in the development is affordable, except maybe a caretaker unit or two, which means 80% of the units are low and very low income, and not more than 20% are moderate income. For these projects, there's an 80% density bonus if you are more than a half mile from transit, and there's an infinite density bonus if you're within a half mile of transit, and you get 4 incentives. The only limitation there is you can't go more than 3 stories above the maximum height for the zone. And then, of course, there is student housing. 20% of the housing units have to be affordable for low-income students and deed restricted for 55 years. In that case, you get a 35% density bonus. And then finally, there is senior housing. Senior housing, if 100% of the units are all for seniors, either 55 and up or 62 and up, you get a flat 20% density bonus. So that was the state of the law before January 1st. So what's new? Well, our first bill is AB 1551, and that simply establishes a density bonus for mixed-use developments. This was actually already on the books previously, but it was one of those laws that had a sunset clause where it said if the legislature doesn't reenact this by a certain date, it'll become automatically repealed, and they dropped the ball and it got repealed, and so it has not been the law for a year. But now they've reenacted this thing. So normally when we talk about incentives for affordable housing development, we talk about development standards affecting the dwelling units, changing the building setback or the height or reductions in parking for the dwellings. But for a mixed-use development, it provides the opportunity for incentives now that affect the commercial use. So if a developer will provide a certain percentage of affordable units in a mixed-use development, he can get incentives that apply to the commercial part. So it'll be a 20% increase in intensity, not density, intensity of the commercial use, an increase in maximum floor area ratio for the commercial use, increase in maximum height of the commercial use, or reduction in minimum parking for the commercial use if he's providing enough affordable units in a mixed-use development. The requirements are that it has to be first in close proximity to public amenities, which simply means it's not that far from schools or employment centers. It doesn't define how close it has to be, but close proximity. It's more specific when it comes to transit, though. It also has to be within a half mile of a major transit stop, which again is a train station or the intersection of 2 bus lines with short headways. If you satisfy those requirements, then you get a 50% bonus and 3 incentives for very low income, or a 50% bonus and 3 incentives for low income. But again, you get to use those incentives for the commercial part of the mixed-use development. And the hope is this will help to make mixed-use developments more financially feasible to support the residential component. Another bill dealing with density bonuses is AB 682. This is interesting. It aims to ease roadblocks facing co-living housing projects. It establishes this new category of, quote, shared housing projects that are eligible for benefits under the state density bonus law. So a shared housing building is defined as a residential or mixed-use structure with 5 or more housing units and 1 or more common kitchens and dining areas designed for permanent residence of more than 30 days by its tenants. If a developer proposes to build one of these and commits to the minimum percentage of affordable units, then the city cannot impose, say, a minimum bedroom count or a minimum unit size to stop the development from going forward. And importantly, the definition of shared housing, they don't require a full-size kitchen. You can simply have a mini fridge and a microwave, and that's good enough. So if you want to build one of these shared housing developments, then you have the same density bonus provisions that you would for a non-shared housing development. These are the same percentages, but if you provide 5% of the shared housing units as very low, then you get a 20% bonus and 1 incentive, and similarly down the list. It also applies to senior housing, which sort of by definition sometimes meets the description of shared housing, since a lot of senior housing developments don't have full-size individual units. They'll just have kitchenettes instead of full kitchens. Notably, Santa Clara's current zoning ordinance does not allow for shared housing, but our new zoning ordinance does. So if theoretically we had somebody come in with a shared housing proposal and they qualified for the density bonus, we would give them the density bonus and allow the shared housing. But otherwise, it'll have to wait for our new zoning ordinance to go into effect. And then lastly, AB 2334, just some changes to density bonus standards. This is really not that interesting. It simply specifies a few things to calculate how you figure out density bonuses. What if there's an inconsistency between the zoning ordinance and the general plan? Certainly not in Santa Clara, but hypothetically, in some other city, if the zoning ordinance said this is the density and the general plan said this is the density, which do you apply? This simply says the higher density prevails. Before this, it actually said the general plan always controlled. There's now additional parking incentives for senior housing. It used to be only 62 and up could get a reduced parking under the density bonus law. Now it's 55 and up. There's also a sort of strange new 100% affordable density bonus for low VMT areas. Earlier, remember I described that 100% affordable density bonus. If you're close to transit, you get an infinite bonus. If you're further away from transit, you get an 80% bonus. This is a bonus if you're in a low VMT area. So they want to also encourage higher density where you have a particularly low amount of vehicle miles traveled. Don't think there are that many areas like that in Santa Clara, but there it is. And that's all in the density bonus law this year. Of course, we have lots of projects that qualify for density bonuses because, you know, with a 15% inclusionary requirement, we have everything qualifies for a density bonus. Anyway, I'm sure Commissioner Salam has questions. Please.
Yes. Okay, so combining the two laws that we've covered so far, if they want to build in an industrial area, and that by almost definition has low VMT, they're going to get the standard bonus or the density bonus for that alone.
Well, okay, so all the laws we've discussed tonight have dealt with commercial and office areas, but have been careful to exclude industrial areas. So you still can't build residential in industrial areas. Wait till next year.
Yeah, 6 months.
Yeah, give them a month or two. Yeah, but you did mention about being surrounded by industrial. So I'm confused a little bit. I think that came up in one of your earlier discussions.
Yes. Right. You can't build housing on an industrial zone. You also cannot build housing if you're on a commercial or a commercial zone, but it's next to an industrial property.
Right.
So there's, I mean, you won't have people having to sit next to, live next to a, paper mill or whatever.
So the question now becomes, what about the vacant commercial that we have? Does the VT count as their vacant, or does it count under what it would be expected to be occupied, while occupied? Did you follow that? I tried to say it right.
This provision applies for very low vehicle travel areas. That is defined as an urbanized area where the existing residential development generates vehicle miles traveled per capita that is below 85% of either regional vehicle miles traveled per capita or city vehicle miles traveled per capita. An area may include a travel analysis zone, hexagon, or grid. Isn't this fascinating? I feel like I'm reading the phone book.
I'd like to be the person who wrote all this. Slowly. Doesn't matter.
So someone should review that and apply it to the facts you have described.
Okay. I'm just concerned that building into the fringes of commercial, which we have considerable of, I believe, still actually vacant, is going to trigger a lot of these bonuses coincidentally,
Yes.
and will increase the incentives that the builders are looking for to justify the building, and will build these large, high density projects and cause our city to grow in ways we never anticipated, because these are not things you would plan for in a planning department, of growing your residential into your commercial, especially adjacent to the industrial, which is common also. Yeah, it's just spinning the wheel of city and regional planning to the point where it's going to become quite a mess. Okay, that's all. I was just wondering if that applied, but I'll look into it myself a little later. Thank you.
I mean, I think the unfortunate realities with this crazy array of laws that have now been enacted over the last several years, anytime a development project that comes in that wants to take advantage of any of them, we sit down and we spend a long time going line by line through every law, trying to figure out what applies and why. And usually it's dealing with the developer's attorney who's arguing for absolutely the most aggressive interpretation of all the laws. And usually it involves a lot of pushing back on our part, arguing for a more restrained approach. So all I can say is that whatever comes through the door, we're going to look at it very carefully.
Well, I'm
Must be
glad
nice
you're
to
there
be
to do that.
Must be nice to be a developer and a lawyer these days.
Exciting.
Commissioner Biagini.
Jesus, listening to all of this, eat your Wheaties. Okay. But I do have a question, because it just started occurring to me in the middle of all this if and or then but stuff. A clear definition of the difference between a bonus versus an incentive. Because as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, well, that would be an incentive. You get to build more units or more height or setback. Well, wait a minute. Is it a bonus or is it an incentive? Because it seems to me you could, depending upon how smart that developer's attorney is, he may apply a particular concept as an incentive instead of a bonus so he can get everything that he wants. So the clear difference between a bonus and incentive, or is there one?
Right. Well, I'm going to make your life even more difficult by introducing a third term. So bonus is strictly numerical. Bonus is, we have a 1 acre lot and this zone allows 100 dwelling units per acre. We're entitled to a 20% bonus. That allows us to go to 120 dwelling units per acre.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's strictly numerical.
Numerical, okay.
Incentive is, I didn't really describe it very well earlier. Incentive is something that will make the project more affordable, make it more feasible to provide for affordable housing. So waive something, I shouldn't use the word
Setbacks,
waiver,
like?
change something that will allow the developer to save money and therefore build more housing, because certainly the developer is going to use all their money that they save to build more housing. Separately from that is the issue of waivers. Waivers are things that are necessary to make the project fit on the site. If after you apply your bonus, so your 120 units, and you look at the development standards and say, wait a minute, it's physically impossible to fit 120 units on this site, even though I'm legally allowed to do so, then the city has an obligation to waive development standards until you can actually fit the 120 units. Incentives, you're entitled to a specific number. You saw, depending on the size of your affordable units and your bonus, you get 1, 2, or 3 incentives, or for 100% affordable, you get 4 incentives. Waivers, you get infinite. Developers are entitled to infinite numbers of waivers until it's possible to fit their project on the site. Every developer comes to us and says, I want all of these waivers. You have to grant all of them, city. And we then turn around and say, no, you can redesign your project a little and still fit it on the site. We don't have to waive every development standard. But we do have to grant incentives. Incentives, we have very little discretion to say no unless there's a health and safety impact that would result. So such as reducing commercial square footage in a mixed-use development. That's something that's come up a lot.
So your 120 example, okay?
That's the bonus.
That would be the bonus.
Yes.
You might waive a setback,
Yes.
but then what would be an incentive?
Reduced parking.
Reduced parking? Oh, there's no parking.
No, in commercial mixed use.
Parking would be a good example of an incentive. Yeah.
Okay, all right, got it.
Because parking's $50,000 a space, so they could build more units if we get rid of 10 spaces, except as you mentioned, a lot of these don't need any parking, so they don't need an incentive for that.
Yeah, right, I'll tell that to the folks in Santa Clara. But,
Yes.
because I was thinking setbacks were an incentive, but that would be a waiver, and that's why I was asking
Yes.
the question.
But again, a waiver, it has to be something to fit the project on the site. If
Gotcha.
you can fit the project on the site
You don't
without a
need it.
waiver, then you can get that as an incentive.
I
So
gotcha.
that's more commonly what happens. We say, you're not entitled to waiver. Use one of your incentives if you want that.
Now it's a lot clearer.
Like I said, it's a lot of sitting down and butting heads with developers who try to squeeze as much as they can out of these laws.
Generally just
Of course, that's
comply
what
just
they
with
do.
CBC and you're all good. We are inching there.
Well,
That's pretty much where we are.
God help us when the
I just
world has to
love
turn to
Soviet-style
attorneys.
construction, I mean, yeah.
That's what it's gonna look like.
It is.
Yeah, well.
What about agricultural lands? Are they protected? Of course, Superfund industrial is now limited. You can't put housing on industrial sites.
Right.
What about on agricultural housing or ag?
Some of these laws exempt quote-unquote prime farmland. But we don't have any of that in Santa Clara. We don't even have any agricultural
took
sites. We
care
have a
of that.
few sites that are zoned A, but they don't have agricultural uses anymore. So that's interesting, but it's moot.
I mean, we had one
yeah.
across Lawrence in Sunnyvale,
Yeah.
which was Agriculture Williamson contracted for the longest period of its time until it's complete housing right now. But I was
Yeah.
just curious, because this
Yeah.
is statewide,
Yeah.
we don't.
Yeah, I don't remember what the definition of prime farmland is. I just, I saw farmland, oh, that's not us. Yeah,
Okay, we'll move on.
Got a
Any other
filter.
questions, Commissioner?
All right, now
I see another hula dance, Commissioner Salim.
things are about to get worse.
Oh, gosh.
Okay.
Commissioner Salim,
I'm sorry.
look at this.
I know. We've talked about farmland, we talked about industrial, we talked about all these things, but I'm going to channel Commissioner Biagini's favorite topic. What impact does it have building adjacent to or in consumption of historical space? Do the developments have any responsibility to respect adjacent historical structures? Also, following that line, what's our policies on solar obscuring? Whereas if they're going to be allowed to build 5-story building directly next to a 2-story home with solar, and it obscures the solar completely, is that going to become a civil lawsuit between the affected resident and the developer? There you go.
You're a devious one, Commissioner Salim. Okay, we do have
'cause we have devious attorneys.
a historic preservation ordinance in the city that requires that if you're going to build next to or within a certain distance of a historic site, 200 feet, you have to go through a special process. I don't think they could get around that. I think they would still have to comply with our historic preservation ordinance to the extent,
We're all praying now.
yeah,
I'm praying.
it doesn't, this is again, there's so many different laws we're talking about here. So,
There's that
I believe this counts as the stump the lawyer point. Thank you.
it's maybe an honorable mention, but, I'm thinking about the ministerial approval back in
Yeah, it's a tough.
In AB 2011, if you're putting a 100% affordable project on a commercial zone and it's ministerial, but you're next door to a historic site where we require you to go through review before we approve it. But if we don't have discretionary review, I don't know. I'm gonna get back to you on that.
There was actually a picture
Although
on
I
your
think it's only an
PowerPoint.
honorable mention because it's sort of the same question that Commissioner Biagini asked first, so.
I didn't really realize I was copying questions. Sorry.
That's okay, Lance.
Okay, so how about the solar encroachment?
Right, and that is a good question. We had something on that last year?
Yeah. No, yeah, last year officially.
Well, I mean, in last year's presentation, wasn't it? Or was it 2 years ago?
I believe we had it related to the development that was right near the city hall, with the affordable housing development there would be casting shadows on an adjacent neighbor. But okay, go ahead.
No, but no, it was something the city enacted.
We'll get back to you on
Okay.
that note.
I don't want to stop it. I don't want to bring us to a halt. Sorry, but
It's just, I'm having to rack my brain because I know we passed something related to this recently. And yeah, I mean, some cities actually have, quote unquote, view preservation ordinances. I used to work with the city of Rancho Palos Verdes, which is built on a hill, and they had a.
Side ordinances are very much effective.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're not uncommon. And so I'm just wondering what the law is on solar as well, if you have a ministerial project and it would block a solar access, but I'll check on that.
I think that would generate a lot of activity within neighborhoods, that people going out and getting very low price solar to lock in the height limit.
Sure. You can buy a $10 solar panel for your cell phone.
Except they're coming up with window panels on solar generating. Okay.
All right. I need to get home tonight. So let's talk about parking. Parking is going to make you unhappy again.
I'm going to mute all of us here.
No, I had one question real quick. I think it's regarding what Lance was talking about in the historical areas. Like, for instance, in the old quad, there's currently, they had knocked down some of the houses and built apartment buildings. Let's say the same owners of those apartment buildings decides to take those apartment buildings down and build larger apartment buildings, or change the complex of the whole thing. So what is the precedence on that? Since there was at one time, even though you have historical homes on either side of you, right now there is an apartment building. And regarding the industrial, I don't know, maybe Nancy can remember this. Memorex used to be right across the railroad tracks from a housing dealer on Main Street. So you had the only thing that separated was the railroad track, and there used to be an industrial, and Memorex used to really stink up the whole neighborhood in that area. And also you have now data centers. So that's they're just building a monstrosity there. It also affects people from Maine and Jackson. So I just wanted to bring you to that. That's already happened. But the apartment buildings in the old quad, and I can see people knocking them down and building more, bigger units. That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, okay, so just generally, can you build an apartment building on a single-family lot? Generally, no. There is the law that was passed last year, Senate Bill 9, that sort of turned single-family zoning on its head.
You misunderstood the question. So you don't have to waste any more time talking about it. There is currently an apartment building on something that is right next to two historical homes that is there already. But let's say they want to take that old apartment building down and build a larger complex. Can that be done, even though you're close to historical landmarks, since you already have an apartment building there? That was my question.
Well, presumably that would need to go through the historic preservation process if it's next to historical properties. If you're knocking down a building and putting up another building that's next to historical properties, you would have to go through the city's historic preservation ordinance. There wouldn't be anything in the current laws that would have changed that. So maybe you could, if you get a significant property alteration permit and go through HLC and the council blesses it. But it wouldn't be a rubber stamp. Okay, parking. I want to make you all feel worse. That'll do it. This actually flows logically from the density bonus discussion because, as Commissioner Biagini noted, you will frequently get an incentive for a reduction in parking if you get a density bonus. That is like the #1 incentive that developers ask for. They will provide a certain amount of affordable housing. In exchange, one of the incentives they'll get is to reduce parking. So this next bill is a bit controversial because it sort of gives the developer the incentive without the affordable housing requirement. AB 2097 says, the city cannot impose any parking requirements on development projects that are within 1/2 mile of public transit. What kind of development projects? Residential, commercial, or other. If it's within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop, which is either a train station or the intersection of 2 bus lines with short headways, we can no longer require any parking on development, period. Now, there is an exception. We can make a finding. If we make a finding that the lack of parking would negatively impact one of these 3 things, then we can still require parking on a particular site. If we say it would harm our ability to meet our regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, for low and very low income households, or it would harm our ability to meet special housing needs for the elderly or persons with disabilities. Or finally, if it would negatively impact existing residential or commercial parking facilities located within 1/2 mile of the housing development project. If we can make one of those 3 findings, then we don't have to waive all of the parking for no reason. But there are some limitations even on this. We have to make those findings within 30 days. Those findings have to be supported by a preponderance of evidence. Preponderance in this context means we have to have the best argument compared to the developer's argument. Most of the time when a city makes a decision, a court reviewing that decision will apply deference to the city's action. As long as there's some substantial evidence in the record, it doesn't matter if there are other arguments against the city's action, a court's not going to weigh and compare them. Under this, it will actually weigh and compare the different arguments. Furthermore, we cannot use the exception at all if the project is at least 20% affordable. We also can't use it if it's senior housing, student housing, or housing for the disabled. And we can't use it if there are fewer than 20 units. There's a minor exception to the bill for event centers, so we can still require parking for employees at event centers. Also, we can still require electric vehicle parking spaces and spaces for the disabled. But that's it. Other than that, if you're within 1/2 mile of transit, no more parking for any kind of development.
What about mixed uses for the retail and commercial?
No, 0 spaces. It has to be voluntarily provided by the developer. It doesn't matter if it's commercial, doesn't matter if it's residential, doesn't matter if it's, a Ferris wheel. No development that's within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop is required to have any parking unless we make one of those 3 findings. Go back 1 slide. I mean, I imagine we will need to try to make these findings repeatedly because there will definitely be situations where this is just a terrible idea. So we're going to at least need to try to make this argument. And I mean, maybe the 3rd bullet point is the strongest. Existing residential commercial parking within 1/2 mile will be adversely affected. So if you're going to put in a new development next to an existing development that has a parking lot in front of it, everybody's going to park in that parking lot, and it's going to make it impossible for the people living there. So I would think that's a reasonable argument to say No. Or, the other two are harder. Would it make it hard for us to achieve our RENA if we don't have any parking? Well, maybe make the area less desirable for developers to come in and build affordable housing units. I don't know. There are arguments that could be made. But we have to make these findings supported by evidence within 30 days, and then the developer can come up with a, quote, better argument and sue us. I think we're going to have to push back on this, though, and see where the chips land.
Their primary transit means whatever job they do, and absolutely removing parking is not even helpful for the project, but for maximizing.
Your audio is broken up and gone.
Sorry. No, I was saying the parking is more critical and relevant to the type of projects these are catering to, the low income, the very low income, because those are the people who travel longest and, are self-employed in many instances, and the elderly. So to say that we are trying to reduce parking to support the ability of affordable tenants to have more units and then have zero ability to move around. See, again, I think we're all quiet.
Yes,
I can't imagine.
all we need are Manhattan subways. But remember, if the project is at least 20% affordable, we cannot even make those findings. The findings are simply unavailable to us. Yeah.
I mean, you can ask for parking on any of these enterprises, including for retail and commercial. So it moots any discussion around parking. Oh, yeah. All right. Is this our New Year's gift?
Jeez.
All right. The rest
Even
of the
more
bills
important to share
are
this
much,
info.
well, the rest of the bills are relatively easier. I want to talk a little bit about just the housing element laws. Usually there's lots of amendments to the housing element laws every year. This time there really aren't that significant. The housing element is one of the mandatory elements of every city's general plan, and it's the only element that has to be certified by the state, the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. The housing element is a set of policies designed to promote development of the number of housing units prescribed by the state, and ABAG, our Council of Governments, and that target number is the RENA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. You will be seeing our new housing element in about 2 weeks, and we have been furiously trying to get it done before the January 31st deadline. Every year we have to do a report to HCD describing our annual progress, how well we're doing on the housing element. And so really all I want to talk about is there's some new reporting obligations that have to be in that annual report. We simply have to now describe in the report the number of housing applications we received, including whether each application was subject to a discretionary or ministerial process. We have to describe the number of housing units demolished. There are a lot of legal obligations when it comes to demolishing housing units, like you have to relocate tenants and you have to replace any units that you demolish, and if they're low-income units, you have to replace them in the same income level. So I think HCD wants to keep tabs on jurisdictions that demolish units. We now have to provide details on all density bonus projects and also AB 2011 applications. AB 2011 is the bill we talked about earlier. Previously, our annual reports only had to include data from a sample of projects receiving density bonus. Now it's data from all projects that receive density bonuses. And since we already require that all projects provide at least 15% of their units as low-income units, all projects are eligible for density bonuses. And so every housing project will now have to be described in our annual report unless it's very small. The bill requires more analysis about the extremely low-income category. That's the sliver of income that's only 30% of area median income. And the bills authorize HCD to require corrections to our annual report and to reject non-compliant portions of the process. But before HCD can reject an annual report within 90 days, they have to request the corrections, and then the jurisdictions have 30 days to make the corrections. So there's the potential for annual reports to run into an iterative process now with HCD. Failure to submit the annual report in the form that HCD wants has been added to the laundry list of offenses for which HCD can refer the city to the Attorney General for enforcement. Now, beyond these annual reporting changes, there is also a change in the law on what has to be in the housing element, and that is related to emergency shelters. And that bill is AB 2339. And this is a policy change. It says cities must now allow for emergency shelters in residential zones, not industrial zones. There was previously a requirement that our housing element identify a zone where we would allow emergency shelters by right. Santa Clara allows emergency shelters in the light industrial zone, the ML zone, in its existing zoning ordinance. But going forward, it will now have to allow emergency shelters in residential zones, or at least zones that are suitable for an emergency shelter and not industrial. Notably, our draft zoning ordinance does allow for emergency shelters in non-industrial zones. So we will be in compliance with this new requirement in our new zoning ordinance. In addition, the bill provides that we can only impose objective standards in approving or denying emergency shelters. We can't apply discretion to decide, well, you know, we really like emergency shelters, but this one little location is not right for it. No discretion. It's just objective. Also, the housing element will have to include an analysis to prove that the city has viable sites for emergency shelters. We can't simply designate a site that has no hope ever of actually being able to site a shelter. We will now have to prove that it is feasible for a shelter to locate in a non-industrial area. Finally, I'd like to close with a couple bills talking about diversity and equity. The first one is AB 2873. It's simply designed to encourage affordable housing developers to employ minority-owned business enterprises. And it accomplishes this goal by requiring affordable housing developers to submit an annual report on their efforts to employ businesses owned by minorities, women, disabled veterans, and LGBT individuals. They're also required to set short and long-term diversity goals and timetables, although there aren't any specific quotas. This requirement applies to affordable housing developers that receive low-income housing tax credits, LIHTCs, of $1 million or more, or who have completed 5 or more affordable housing projects. Housing developers who don't meet those criteria right now will have to start submitting an annual report in the year after they meet either of those criteria. So this is simply a step to increase diversity in affordable housing development. And one other thing I wanted to discuss is SCA 2, Senate Constitutional Amendment number 2. This is not something that's already become law. This is something that the state legislature has voted to put on the ballot, because as a constitutional amendment, it must be approved by the voters. And what it does is it proposes to repeal Proposition 10, which was enacted in 1950. It's also known as Article 34 of the state constitution. It passed by a majority of 50.78% in 1950. This is the flyer that was submitted supporting Proposition 10 in 1950, a message to every Californian who believes in democracy. Insist on your American right to vote. Vote yes on 10. Well, what vote were they talking about? They were talking about a vote on any residential development project that involved an expenditure of public funds. This proposition enacted what was called the Public Housing Project Law. This arose at the same time as the Red Scare and used some of the same rhetoric. The California Real Estate Association paid for the campaign to pass Proposition 10. In one publication, Charles Shattuck of the association argued that, quote, if you value your property, if you hold liberty dear, if you believe in the dignity of the individual, if you love the land of the free and the home of the brave, if you desire to stop the enemy of socialism that is gnawing at the vitals of America from within, the ballot box is your weapon, the one and only means by which our great republic will be preserved and improved. Article 34 passed. It shut down public housing development across the state. Specifically, it created a major barrier for affordable housing in the Bay Area. It forced votes that blocked multiple public housing proposals in the 1950s and 60s, including one in the city of San Jose and two in San Mateo County. After those defeats, because local housing authorities fully recognized that their referenda were probably always going to fail, they rarely submitted proposals for new low-income housing. A group of citizens eligible for low-income housing challenged Article 34 after the failed referenda, and it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. They argued that Article 34 violated the Equal Protection Clause by denying low-income people access to housing. But in 1971, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Article 34 in a case called James versus Valtierra because the law is neutral on its face. And so it has been a part of the legacy of California for more than 70 years. Three prior efforts failed by wide margins to repeal the bill, with opponents arguing that, well, residents should have the right to keep public housing out of their neighborhoods, the most recent being in 1993. Now, today, Article 34 is not quite as blunt an instrument as it was 70 years ago. The legislature passed legislation limiting its impact in 1976. They noted that there were a lot of ambiguities in the law, like defining public housing project. And so they added a definition. You had to have more than 49% of the units funded by public funds. So projects with 49% or less affordable units did not have to go through Article 34 voting. More recently, some regions like the Bay Area have actually supported public funded housing when it comes up for a vote. And affordable housing developers are able to structure deals to avoid triggering Article 34 by using either federal or state tax credits instead of direct public funding. Nevertheless, Article 34 continues to pose significant obstacles and increased costs for affordable housing developers and for public agencies who have to carefully design projects and funding sources to ensure that their projects are either exempt from Article 34 or to comply with it. And affordable housing developers have to seek more costly sources of funding to avoid triggering its requirements. SCA 2 proposes to repeal Article 34 in its entirety. We will see how it does in March of 2024.
So we'll see a resurgence of those old political flyers?
It's scary how much of it is just so familiar.
Yeah.
I mean,
No
it's just,
kidding.
I mean, it's hard to read, but it's
You know, they wave
just-
that socialism flag and everybody will go
Yeah,
berserk.
I mean, Proposition 10 is the very essence of American democracy. Every true believer in democracy will agree that the right to vote is not a danger, but a cherished blessing. The right to
Oh,
oppress
dear.
minorities.
Okay, we have Commissioner Boozer. You're on mute, sir.
No questions. I just wanted to say thank you to Assistant City Attorney for getting into political matters, which really we shouldn't be involved in right now. Just focus on getting all of this passed to our citizens so they can understand the new laws coming into effect.
Thank you.
Leave the politics out of it.
Yes, and I took pause before I decided to include this one. However, since it was about housing and it will be front and center within
Yes,
the
but
next
you
year.
put your views, if you don't mind me saying so, you put your views up there for. I may agree, I would disagree with you, but I would not bring it in front of the commission and the planning commission right now, my political views. And you shouldn't either.
I know it was, you know, a thought shared as an attorney, Commissioner Boozer. I appreciate your perception of it as well. Okay, any other comments? Commissioner Biagini?
Mic on. I really appreciate your comprehensive coverage on all this stuff, Xander, because good Lord, I'm not, I get a little lost sometimes in it. I'm sure you do. I see we are, boy, you want to make a lot of money, become an attorney for developers, I suppose. But we have a big road in front of us. And once again, I just really hope the city will do some outreach on the implications of all of this, because there are certainly items that folks are going to be shocked to learn, and it's going to be difficult for all of us. But thank you for such a comprehensive review of this, the land that lies before us.
Commissioner Salem? You're muted, sir.
And now I'm not. Okay, I'm going to go along with that. Xander's outstanding ability to cover the details of things like this is, it's one of the reasons I find being able to be a part of the Planning Commission manageable, because I think, I don't know about others joining, but I came in under the idea that I was very anti-density. And then such a true education has happened since then. And I have come to the understanding at this point that there are no black and white answers to anything. It is gray. Everything's gray. And it's a very smooth gray that covers everything. So having his insight has been very helpful to understand where we need to focus our efforts and our attentions. And I can see here that our energy is going to be really heavily involved in making sure that the development in our communities is rational, appropriate to the area, and at a density that helps our city instead of turns it into a chunky mishmash of uncorrelated development. And that's the thing that I worry the most. That's just it's a frightening future to think of, that everything happens completely outside of our control, and we become a checkerboard of discontinuous pieces of development. So, okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Salem. Any other members of the commission? I'll add some color commentary. I don't know if you've been tracking. There have been recent CNBC, followed by the San Francisco Standard. The recent, of course, spate of tech companies' layoffs, and has kept the San Francisco downtown at 27% vacant, which is unheard of. It has been, of course, ongoing with the pandemic, but the revelations from the leadership, including the mayor for county of San Francisco, has been even pushing on the brinks of removing affordable as a caveat to increasing housing, and the possibility of converting some of the office buildings to other mixed uses, including housing. So just to balance out where the other voices are probably coming from is the large amount of vacancies in commercial real estate triggering another, you have a deficit, you have an excess supply in other uses that they are trying to reconcile. Just for context, 27 million square feet out of the 90 million square feet is vacant. That's 27 sales towers, because the Salesforce Tower is about 1 million square feet. It was pretty revealing. So to understand that certain communities, including the downtown commercial district, is hurting significantly, will make us look at this slightly different. Again, thank you. Thank you, Xander. Now you feel all lightened, your burden's out.
Oh, I think it's just starting. No other questions? I mean, not to encourage you, but I think I've had worse.
No, I'm looking forward to seeing how the city staff will get supplemented. Evaluating seemingly all of your reviews now are going to be ministerial, but under the light of the law versus a discretionary capability of relying on planning commission or the city council to be your alibis or actually your decision makers. Now you're going to have to be the decision making with the law. And so I hope each of you become, supported and incredibly savvy at interpreting all this lingo. Wishing you the best. Moving on.
Well, I just wanted to add one more thing. Is I'm still kind of in shock over the parking issues, and I think it's going to take a while to understand the full implications of that. I think the majority of what's going to happen, putting on my prognosticator hat and looking into the future, I suspect that the majority of our issues are going to be neighbors that are incensed by developments that are going up next to them with zero parking, with the understanding completely logically that their neighborhoods are now going to become the parking lot. So, I guess the only way out of it is to remove all public transit, and then therefore no parking zones will never exist.
That's one way to address it.
I'm being absurd, but it's the one answer. We have no public transit, therefore none of this applies.
That's one way to address it.
It's a sick and twisted idea. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Do we have to open this for public, even though I don't see any members? Oh, I see Commissioner Boozer with the hand up still? No, okay. Do we need to open for public hearing? Not that I see anybody, just for the record.
Just to ask if anyone wants to come.
Okay. Open public hearing, close public hearing. No, with nobody in online as well.
No, we don't have anyone wanting to make comments.
Okay.
You could just move on.
All right, that was very, 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 thank you.
Thank you.
Insightful. I know we are bracing for something more than the storm right now, but it is a reality. So let's at least get the education up. Moving to the next order of items, reports of commission, board liaison and committee members, announcements / other items. I wanted to bring to, I think one of the, we could do it under training, but I could, I can do it right now. Commissioner Bhatnagar, thank you again. Commissioner Bhatnagar reached out to me for both a conversation about how we could better support the city, as well as through the Planning Commission, bring better education forward to us. So I forwarded his email, and I think you have it in your email as well as on your, in front of you today. I'll read it for the record because I think it's insightful. Thank you again, Commissioner Bhatnagar, that we should press for a study session on outreach and obtaining input from the public on various projects. I think this is very aligned with today's conversation about how are we making projects / state law awareness through outreach. And I think Commissioner Bhatnagar is more interested in how we do it today and how we can better it with an actual study session based on his attending, or some of us attended the CLG? No, what was the?
ILG.
The county city training.
Cupertino,
ILG. So one of his recommendation is to bring the instructor or the person who organized or the person who gave the talk to our planning commission and share with us some of our how we can improvise our community outreach. I know you have a lot more to say, so go ahead, Commissioner.
No, thank you, Chair. I think the email, and I think also, Elizabeth, you have email chains going back where the provider for that training has reached out to you and is awaiting some.
It is correct, and I think we're going to be working on trying to get them to do a presentation for the Planning Commission.
Yeah,
So
wonderful.
yes, I do have the information.
Yeah. And I guess for the next meeting, there's a full agenda with the housing element and response to RENA, so it may be unlikely to have that at that time, but maybe the meeting after that. Yep. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, and the second one was, I think, to his inputs on thinking outside the box to the homeless task force, and I think you've communicated that with Alex and staff members. It is for your ability to read later. So thank you again for bringing forward the awareness of how we can better do our roles here as planning commissioners, but also ensure our community benefits from our training and awareness. Okay, any other announcements by staff? No?
Chair, may I just add a comment?
Yeah.
In regards to the element of outreach and how we can better get effectively customer or public input into our projects, one additional thing might be helpful if, as staff presents their findings from outreach activities, to correlate that also with the proposal that they're actually coming up with, having gotten that output, right? So there is a survey, there's a result, and then there's a proposal. And there's an assumption that the proposal matches the community feedback. But I would like to more explicitly see that if that's possible. So community said this, and we are doing this because the community said this. This is how we are addressing their concerns. And that makes, I think, the city government a lot more responsive to customer and public comments. That would be helpful. But that's just a thought and input for us to consider. Thank you.
I see Commissioner Salem.
Make sure I'm not muted. I wanted to note that I did pass out a letter of thanks for Elizabeth's involvement in a number of activities that we've been involved in, well, the CEQA conference specifically. I just was looking for advice on how to make sure that that doesn't vanish into the ether and can get somewhere more permanent. Do we maybe enter something like that into the record or have it requested to be put in a permanent file? I don't know what the right process is for that. So I'm looking for advice.
I agree.
So to staff, this is a full-on acknowledgement, appreciation, and commendation to Elizabeth Elliott, who supports the Planning
Send it
Commission
to
staff.
HR.
And we would like to somehow make apparent or share it with both your staff leadership and or city council on what that does. Thank you.
Yeah. Do we need to do anything formal, like motion to have it noted and filed? I've never done one of those. I don't remember, at least. Or we could just assume that since the names were appropriate on the to list, maybe we can hope that they get the letter into the right place. But I didn't want to put words into other people's mouths. I simply presented it as something I wanted to have recorded. But if others have comments, or they're welcome to chime in to or respond to the letter and add to it. So that's all. I wanted to thank her. Thank you very much.
And hopefully that gets reflected in the minutes, what we said. So I know this might be a little embarrassing for you, Elizabeth. But
Thank you,
honestly,
commissioners.
it's-
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
could not have made, I'm not sure how many of us would have gone if you hadn't helped us as much as you did. So I think it's something to reflect in the minutes so it doesn't get lost, at the very least.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You did a great job, Elizabeth. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Absolutely stellar job.
Yeah. Above and beyond.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Biagini?
Just one quick comment, because I'm not sure where else I can say this. Lance, I would love to visit that town behind you. I am so impressed with your Lego abilities, and if you can do that, I think there's some towns you can design. Thanks.
Without transit stops.
Yeah, yeah, without transit stops and maybe some, anyway, it's wonderful, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it meets all the density bonuses what Leslie is sharing here.
That's real density.
Exactly. Moving to the next topic, Commissioner Travel Training Reports, request to attend trainings. I think we do have our CEQA report, if one of our 4 commissioners who attended wants to go. Commissioner Boozer? Oh, your hand is still up unless I'm recognizing you. Sorry. Okay, anybody want to give feedback?
Go ahead, Lance. Go for it.
Well, all I can say is that if you want to visit that town, you have to be this small. So, that's the average size of a residence. So,
All right, I'll start my diet tomorrow.
there you go.
Okay, back to our commissioner trainings.
Yes.
So I'll give a report out, and then others can chime in. Thank you again to city staff, Elizabeth, to help us get to this. It was December 15th and 16th at the Grand Hyatt San Francisco. This is an annual international CLE, a conference exclusive for CEQA. We had Friday and Saturday sessions, of which, interestingly, the featured topics were not in my backyard. We had balancing local control with regional coordination through Senate Bill 375, very insightful by the mayor of Darrell Steinberg, and I could almost see resonation of the public housing because that was one of his comments as to how we did not pass public housing like the state supports public schools. And there was an anomaly that stuck to me. And now seeing this, I can see where the voices are, because again, the mayor of Sacramento was directly working with state, but didn't realize that the housing support was really coming from county. And so the layers of bureaucracy continues to be a challenge, was the message. Of course, there was ethics. But a big part of the afternoon session on the Friday was housing elements. So thank you again for reiterating a second time session for all of the 4 who attended, Xander. But there's never, you can listen to the housing elements a number of times and still wonder what happened with the housing laws. CEQA findings, of course, was one. And then on Saturday, on the Thursday session, we had GHG analysis. We had several case laws, which I think only the lawyers thrived on. And then we had the legislative updates on land use from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, Sacramento, about what's new. And then the wildfire evacuation. And of course, the CEQA findings was insightful as well. That was my takeaway. I thoroughly enjoy those CEQA sessions. That's my passion, now no longer my bread and butter. But Xander's so relieved that I don't do that for a living anymore. Now I'm only half intelligence, which is even more dangerous. But it was insightful. Thank you again. Any others who want to share their comments?
I really enjoyed Lance's question during the meeting, and I'm sure everybody apprecited it.
They didn't bring the mic to us after a while.
Yeah, especially when they started ignoring us, looking the other way from the room. But it was very interesting. We learned a lot. I think we learned a lot. And Sander, what you did is made it a little bit clearer. The things that they covered made it a lot easier for us to comprehend. So I really appreciate it, what you did today.
I have to say, one of the sessions that I'm not sure the word enjoy would be the right one, was not in my backyard, because to me that's so applicable to what's happening in the city. And wildfire evacuation of all things. I did not think that really applied to any of us, but to understand what's going on with all that made me realize that depending upon where the wildfire is, we could also have the influx of folks leaving it. So there was so much good information. It really was packed. And even though their legislative updates were focused on CEQA, you went so much further beyond that. So it's much appreciated. And Xander, if you think Lance likes to stump you, he was in fine form at that conference. And I'm not kidding you. They sort of looked the other way by the second day and stayed away from the four of us. But he asked great questions. All right, that's all.
Commissioner Salem.
Oh my God.
He's
I am
turning
my
red.
reputation. Give me, I am pink, yeah. No, I think my takeaway was that, and the reason they kept moving the mic to the other side of the room is I would always ask the question is, okay, you want higher density, that depends on public transit, and you want lower parking, that kind of depends on public transit, and you want everything they want, everything they're legalized or legally pursuing, all hinges on public transit. But the one thing that they didn't address on how to improve or give assistance with us to improve was public transit. So everything that was being proposed, everything that was being reviewed, completely built on a foundation of public transit that had no answers. So I think our concern and our ongoing efforts are going to really start hinging hard on increasing the capabilities of our public transit. And as Xander has said many times in the presentation, we don't have subways. You're not going to get subways in Santa Clara. You'll be getting, waterways. That would be about the only thing under there. So unless we as a city can start to really seriously address how we're going to improve the transit for our residents, none of these grand plans and mandated improvements are going to have a real rational hope of succeeding in the long run. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Salem. And to add to that point, there was not a single presentation or even representation from VTA or even the Transportation Authority. There was just almost, and we probably were the only planning commissioners. Everybody else, they were either lawyers or AICP professional credits. So we were like the only commission interested. So again, a good session. I understand there is another training coming up, or what is it, the Silicon Valley?
Yes.
State of-
Excuse me, February 17th is the State of the Valley, and I'll be registering. I've heard from, I think it was 5 or 6 commissioners, so you'll be registered for that. I also put together a list of the annual travel conferences. These are the ongoing ones. I will send it to you all via email. Thank you. Leslie pulled it up. If you want to take a look, I thought this would be good for your planning purposes. So you have the State of the Valley, February 17th. In March, and this is, your opportunity to look at your budget also. In March, the League of California Cities Planning Commissioner Academy, that'll be in Garden Grove. There is no virtual option for that one. And I made a note on there, typically in the past, we've had new commissioners attend that, but it doesn't mean that you cannot vote on whoever wants to attend that meets your needs. In May, there's the APA National Conference. That's going to have a virtual as well as an in-person component. And then the last one is in September, and that's your APA California Conference in Fresno. So these are the ones that pretty much every year have come up. It doesn't mean other smaller ones won't, but I think this will help you with planning.
Very nicely put together. And do we take mostly votes closer to the date?
Yeah, I think this is your opportunity to look at it, look at your calendars, kind of determine who might want to attend.
Yeah.
And then, we'll vote closer to that. timeframe.
Great. So as of now, 6 planning commissioners are virtually attending the joint venture Silicon
Correct.
State of the Valley.
Correct.
Pending our confirmation, but
Yes.
that is something that we need to just identify in the budget. So we can clear that today. We'll move on. Director of Community Development reports, Planning Commission budget updates. We just got one item now for the approval to get the State of the Valley Conference approved by the commission today.
Right, and I did add that on to this report. So your budget is approximately $10,249.
After purchase
Yes, correct.
tickets. So today's motion, if one of you could recommend the motion.
I think you made a motion at the
Last
last
time?
meeting,
Okay.
so we're okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thank you for the awareness on our budget. Upcoming agenda items.
The only thing I have to say, which we've already said this evening, is our next meeting's on January 23rd. It's a special planning commission hearing, and we'll be presenting our draft housing element.
Thank you. So, again, hoping most of us are here with a quorum on Jan 23rd. City council actions.
There are no reportable city council actions.
With that, move to adjourn to January 23rd, 2023 Special Planning Commission meeting.
I'll second that and vote in favor.
And I hope the community stays safe through the next wave of storms. I just wanted to give a shout out to the city, especially staff, our utilities, our first responders, and people out there in the community who are doing everything to stay safe and keep others safe. So, thank you.
You.
Okay,